Welcome, everybody, to the Tight End Tiers show here on Fantasy Football Today. It is Thursday, July 17th. I'm tired, guys. I could not sleep last night.
Oh, I slept terribly.
Oh,
I went to bed early and just awful sleep.
Well, I was going for like a fantasy football joke here, but we can get into your drama too.
No, it's awful. I'm sorry. I know that this show is really about you, and we're just kind of your co-stars. But
guys, let me just say, as the star of the show, I had a lot of trouble sleeping last night because I just kept flip-flopping. Bowers or McBride? Bowers or McBride? McBride or Bowers? Finkel or Einhorn? And I just don't know. I don't know yet. I think I changed teams to Team Heath here. I think I'm McBride now, but I don't know. But maybe Jamie can convince me to go. I'm sorry. I think I'm Bowers now. Maybe Jamie can convince me to go back to Team Jamie, which
I think you just had a slip. That tells you what side you really want to be on.
No, I don't know. I mean, it's just, they were so close last year. Their metrics were almost identical. But
Heath, I have a question.
A lot of ways to look at.
Do you think Adam practices his material on his family?
I think he probably practices in a room by himself.
Stands in front of a mirror and says, "Oh, I got a great flip-flop joke. Let's see how this works."
Yeah.
I was holding a flip-flop in my hand while I did it. If you think I'm this bad at delivering and I still practice, that is an insult. Like, obviously, this is my first run at it right now. I should.
No. But listen, the delivery is totally different because, you started your joke and then Heath also chimed in, so that might have thrown you off a little bit.
Yeah.
Like hey, Allie, I got this great joke. What do you think if I start the show with, I'm really torn between these two tight ends. Like, what if I, say, oh, I'm flip-flopping or I couldn't sleep. I was torn, and then she just rolls her eyes and does what she probably normally does and just ignores you. But
no, I don't do that. But maybe, what did you think about the Finkel Einhorn joke in there? Because that was spontaneous.
But that's not really like a flip-flop, though.
No, but it was a Bowers McBride. But it was Finkel Einhorn was a football joke. Did you?
I mean, like you would have gone Vicar Ryan. Like that would have been funnier.
So wait, are you saying that is a football movie, but Jerry Maguire is not?
No, it's not a football movie. It has about as much. It has about as much sports in it as Jerry Maguire, and neither of them are football movies. Okay. Anyway, welcome to the show.
That's terrible.
We have a Twitter poll up, and we'll show it in a little bit. Before we do that, and the Twitter poll is McBride or Bowers. See how the people are feeling about it. What's your favorite tight end tier, Jamie?
One.
Yeah. Sorry. Favorite one to draft from?
Two.
The Kittle tier.
No, I mean, look, I think our theory that you came up with is, or our strategy you came up with many years ago, great or late, is fantastic. You should have seen, by the way, Heath, when Alfredo brought it up. I don't know if it was about tight ends though, was it?
I think it was.
He said, "Yeah, great or late." And Adam's like,
"He didn't say great or late." He didn't say that. He didn't name that. Name it that. He didn't say the words great or late. He referenced the strategy. I don't think he said great or late.
I thought he did say great or late.
Oh man, steam would have been coming out of my ears if he had said that. But I don't.
No, it was in a very favorable mention. Like,
oh, I thought you meant he took it like as it was his.
No.
Obviously, he would have been doing that as a joke. Yeah.
Okay, so in light of the last 60 seconds, I think your open's looking pretty good.
I tend to, I don't know what tier it's in, but I tend to get a lot of the Njoku. I draft a lot of Njoku and Evan Ingram. Those are the two tight ends I draft the most.
I know you didn't ask me, Adam, but I pretty much take Bowers or McBride, or I take Njoku or Kelsey.
Njoku's tier 3 for Jamie, and Ingram's tier 4. And I was going to ask you, Heath, obviously. All right, so let's show that Twitter poll. Who do you like better? McBride or Bowers? Schaefer voted for McBride. 2/3, though, for Bowers. 1,067 votes. I think I posted this, 11:04 p.m. last night. And, 4,600 people viewed it and only 1,000
It's so weird, right? Why wouldn't you just click the button?
Yeah, just click it. It's not hard. So
Bowers, I bet you'd have more votes if you'd put a see results in there.
And then Heath, you would have voted Bowers, Jamie, McBride, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But they are in tier 1, and it's really a question of how early is too early for those guys, and which running backs, which wide receivers do you draft ahead of them? Before we get into the tiers and some news and notes, an update on Najee Harris. Here's an update on Draftathon. We're up to $3,011. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. Right now, we want you to bid on those mailbag spots. There are 4 left. The questions will be read tomorrow. $50. Get your question read on a mailbag. We did sell out of the spots for the Tuesday night mock draft, which we will be live streaming, but we'll have another one of those up next week for purchase for the following Tuesday. But anyway, if you want your mailbag question read and answered on tomorrow's show, tinyurl.com/tinyurl.com/2025FFT, sorry, and $50 all goes to St. Jude. Meanwhile, Podcast Awards, we won it last year. Let's win it again this year. Go to podcastawards.com/app/sign up. podcastawards.com/app/sign up. Put in a little bit of information. It takes about 30 seconds. And then nominate Fantasy Football Today in the sports category. All right. News and notes. Najee Harris likely to start training camp on the non-football injury list, but not expected to be there for a long time. So hopefully back sooner rather than later. Perhaps an opportunity for Omarion Hampton to stake some claim into that starting role. But right now, it doesn't seem like a long-term thing for Najee, nor does it seem like that for Mike Williams, who has some injury that he sustained in the spring. Wide receiver for the Chargers, he is expected to come off the PUP list pretty soon. Second-round picks, only 3 of them have signed. This is about guaranteed money. 2 second-round picks received fully guaranteed deals, and every other second-round pick probably wants it too or something close to it. That's why it's been slow. But a third one signed yesterday, so the thinking might be that the floodgates will start opening, and guys like RJ Harvey, for example, can be, and all the other second-round running backs and wide receivers that we care about can be signing their deals soon. Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated thinks that Stephon Diggs is trending toward playing in week 1. He's recovering from a torn ACL. Where do you think you could see Diggs moving into in your rankings, Heath? What do you think the highest you could see Diggs would be?
So, yeah, let's say that he starts training camp. I've made this comment a lot about Rashee Rice, but let's say that Stephon Diggs gets through a week of training camp and he's just doing the same thing that everyone else is, and we're assuming he's going to play week 1. I would say it's somewhere, I mentioned the mega tier that runs for me from basically wide receiver 21 to 39. He'd be towards the bottom of that.
Okay. And Jamie's got him 42nd, and Dave has him 39th right now. Jamie, could you see moving Diggs up even further than 42nd?
A spot or two, not very much. I mean, you're still talking about a 32-year-old receiver coming off an ACL tear with a passing game that's got a lot of question marks. So I don't want to get overexcited about the report that he's going to be ready week 1. I've kind of been going off that assumption when he showed up to minicamp, you know, and looked like he was trending in that direction. So he was very good last year. I think he's going to have a lot of solid moments, but we know what this injury has typically been. And for a guy that's at his age, there's still a lot of questions for me.
And this is just my memory. I could look it up, and if Dave was here, he'd probably look it up.
I got it. I'll look it up.
His slot rate was extremely high last year, right?
Yeah, it was. Dave would be like, give me 1 second. I'll look it up.
That's the only other concern that I have is I don't think he's going to play in the slot near as much. And can he still win at his age coming off this injury against number 1 corners?
46% slot rate for Stephon Diggs last year. That's very high. The previous 2 years, it was 31%, which is, it's slotty. He's in the slot, but 46% is very high.
I will say this though, Heath, because I know you keep mentioning it, and I agree. It seems as if Demario Douglas is going to be that guy. I think if they realize that Diggs is better for this offense there, and we're talking about Demario Douglas versus, let's say, Mac Hollins and being Hollins and Williams on the outside, for example, like that's something you could easily see happening.
Cleveland in no rush to sign Quinshon Judkins. There's another second-round pick who hasn't signed, and obviously the arrest last week. The Commanders signed Von Miller, and Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic says that Josh Reynolds seems pretty locked in as the Jets' number 2 wide receiver. This is the second time we've had a report, it may have even been from him, but recently. But Josh Reynolds as wide receiver 2 for the Jets. It's interesting. Maybe he can get off to a good start or something like that. He's kind of an old receiver.
I might put him in the Scott Fishbowl queue for round 19.
There you go. So a couple of comments here. New Adam is disrespectful of other sleep habits.
That's nothing new.
Heath had a nightmare in which he was served baked burgers and dino chicken nuggets. Yeah. So what happened with you last night? Why couldn't you sleep? Was it McBride and Bowers?
It was not. No, I don't have any good reason for it. I'm getting old, and some nights you just don't sleep very well. Toss and turn.
Yeah, it happens. You still turn the pillow over?
Yeah.
The cool side. I don't do that. Also, 1 or 2 pillows for you guys.
2.
1.
2 is weird. 2 is weird. Why do you need 2 pillows? I don't like it. All right. Jamie's tiers. He said he likes tier 2. That's George Kittle. Guess who's in tier 1? The top 2 guys, it's McBride and Bowers. All right. It's easy to put them in tier 1. I think it's easy to put Kittle in tier 2. It's difficult to say when should McBride and Bowers be taken. So, Jamie, when does it go? When do the bells go off for you? All right, it's tight end time.
When would I do it, or when do I think it's going to happen?
When would you recommend doing that?
I would look for both toward the back end of round 2. That is not going to happen, though, based on almost every draft I've seen. Bowers typically comes off the board middle of round 2. McBride tends to slide to that spot. I just think, like you said something. I don't remember when it was. Maybe it was the Juwan Jennings conversation. We were talking about Kittle. That the difference between the top 2 guys and Kittle based on the points per game last year. And you were saying, I think I'm going to paraphrase, but that if those 2 guys are going to be drafted in round 1 or round 2, and Kittle's not going to go till round 3 or round 4, like based on Kittle's performance last year and maybe the bump that he gets without Debo there and Ayuk coming off the PUP list, that they have to be significantly better than Kittle. And that made me sort of reevaluate this a little bit, that I don't know if they're going to be that significantly better than Kittle, because last year was, in some cases, maybe the best that we'll see. And I do think that McBride's going to get more touchdown opportunities. I'm a little concerned about Bowers just because of the changes in the offense, not to a degree that I'm scared of him to draft him. I wouldn't draft him as high as he's going in ADP, but I think that 15 to 16 points per game, which is what they were last year. Yeah. They were just, little shy of 16. And Kittle was just, decimal points better than them. I don't see that bump up to where Kelsey was at, 20 points per game, 18 points per game. I think that's just a huge ask in their respective offenses. So I put both guys at the start of round 3, whereas where I have them. And again, I don't think I'll be getting Bowers there. And Kittle is back into round 3, round 4 for me.
I think the interesting thing, like looking at all 3 of these guys as if they're just what they've been in terms of their numbers and what they could be. When I look at it, I see we've talked about it a ton. There's probably positive touchdown regression coming for Trey McBride. If not, he's going to have one of the lowest touchdown rates that anyone's ever had in their entire career, because that was insane last year. He should score more touchdowns. We shouldn't be surprised if he scores a little more in terms of fantasy points because of that. Bowers' touchdown regression is less obvious, but I still think it likely comes because he had a very, very low touchdown rate. He has a better offensive coordinator whose teams generally score more touchdowns, and he has a significant quarterback upgrade. With Kittle, I think you could look at the situation with Ayuk's question marks at health and Debo being gone and think his targets could go up. At the same time, he's 31. He'll turn 32 in the middle of the season. And last year was his best reception total since 2019, his best yardage total since 2018, and the second best touchdown total of his career. His efficiency in terms of yards per target was the best of his career. His catch rate was his best since 2020. Like, that was George Kittle just had one of his best seasons at 30 and 31 years old. And in my projections process, I actually project a little bit of negative regression in terms of efficiency for Kittle. And that's where I get a little bit bigger gap. I think I've got McBride similar to what he did last year, which puts him at the end of round 2 for me. I have Bowers improving on what he did last year because of those surroundings that have gotten better. And I have Kittle a little worse than last year.
It's funny how you think the surroundings have gotten better. And I think Jamie would make the case for Bowers that the surroundings have gotten worse, probably because of pass volume. I will find out if I am right about that take after we take a commercial break. We'll get Jamie's thoughts on that. Did things actually get worse for Brock Bowers? And maybe this is this is how people could determine who they like, Bowers or McBride. It's certainly a big part of it for me. I also have a cautionary tale about George Kittle and those targets. And we'll be right back after this to talk about tiers 1 and 2, some more on FFT.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
So, Jamie, am I right in saying that you think the situation got worse for Brock Bowers because they were 4th in pass attempts last year?
I don't want to use the word worse because I think there's something he said which kind of gets overlooked a little bit. The quarterback situation got better. The coaching got better, and so those things matter. But yes, in terms of how are things going to be distributed, the biggest thing for me is not necessarily I mean, you said it. That is the biggest thing is the run game. So the pass volume is going to come down, and if the run game is successful, especially hoping for more touchdowns for Bowers, I think 8 is probably a safe number. He scored 5 last year, so can he get to 8? I would be very surprised if he's not close to that. So 5 to 8 is probably the range. I would go more toward the optimistic side and say that's 8 is a good number. I just don't see the targets being the same, and he's going to be a monster. Look, whenever you see rookie seasons like this was what's so disappointing about Kyle Pitts, for example. You see rookie seasons like this. I'm not talking about just tight ends, just pass catchers. You tend to see them build off of it, especially when you're an elite prospect. And I don't think he's going to disappear by any stretch. Look, Jack Besh and Thornton and whatever else they have, Jacoby Myers still being there. Like those guys aren't, taking targets away from Brock Bowers to a significant margin, but they are better as a group around him based on what they had a year ago. You lose Devontae Adams and it was Trey Thornton and just a bunch of guys. So if these rookies can be somewhat of significant playmakers, it's just a matter of the volume. And again, when I say I'm downgrading Bauer, they're back-to-back still. I don't think that what we saw last year is going to be that much difference, from a decimal point standpoint, that's how different these guys were. It's just a matter of what's the ceiling for both of them. And so, yes, like he said about McBride, it'd be very surprising if a guy that was top 3 in red zone opportunities at his position, 21 red zone targets last year, doesn't score more touchdowns. They made such an effort last year to do that. I think that carries over to some degree, not clearly the emphasis on it because he didn't have one, but I do think that they do a better job of getting him in the end zone. So he's probably like a 5 touchdown guy. Like, I don't think we're looking at a 10 touchdown guy for McBride. That would be amazing. I think that's the one situation where you could say, okay, who can get to those Kittle numbers? I think if McBride gets 10 touchdowns on top of the numbers that he's getting because his offense didn't really change very much, like that could shatter the position potentially. So yeah. I think McBride's ceiling to me this year is a little bit higher. Bowers is right behind him. And then the only thing I'll disagree with on Kittle is that we've seen this before. We've seen this narrative before. It's played out. Whenever somebody's been missing from this offense, his numbers have just been that much better. I don't have it in front of me. I can look it up if you want to. But there's no Debo. There's potentially no Ayuk. We don't know the Jennings situation right now. This is a guy that Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan lean on when these situations arise. And now we're here again. So yes, McCaffrey's back, and Pearsall may be a big part of this, and all these things. And yet his efficiency may come down a little bit. But what if the targets go up? Well, like what if we get more chances for him?
So the thing is with Kittle, I mean, he's the most efficient tight end in football, basically, right? And his ADOT has even gone up the last couple of years, and Heath, you mentioned his catch rate. Usually ADOT goes up, catch rate goes down. Well, his catch rate and his yak still incredible. His explosive play rate has been the highest it's been in 2 years. And I think Purdy has a lot to do with that. Purdy looks for him in the end zone a little bit more, so the touchdowns have been a little bit better. But I do want to say with Kittle, it's like, yeah, Ayuk is going to probably start on PUP. Debo is gone, but McCaffrey is back. And McCaffrey's an 80 target guy the last time we saw him play a healthy season with San Francisco. And Kittle was like a 90 target guy that year. So in the last 5 games, the last 10 weeks of 2022 after the McCaffrey trade, McCaffrey plays a game against Kansas City, he barely plays. 10 weeks after that, there were 5 games where McCaffrey, Ayuk, Debo, and Kittle were all healthy. Kittle's target share was less than 14%. Then in 2023, he had a good year, but it was one of the worst years of his career, but still good. But it was like 13. How many PPR fantasy points per game for Kittle that year? In the 13 range.
But look at the end of the season when Purdy took over.
No, that was a Purdy year. That was 23. That was 2023. He was tight end 7 per game. He had 90 targets in 16 games, and they threw for 4,600 yards and 33 touchdowns. But you had Ayuk with 105 targets, Kittle with 90, Debo with 89, McCaffrey with 83. So go ahead.
I don't think, and this may end up being wrong, but I don't think there's any reason to really look at Kittle's situation this year in terms of his target competition as different from last year.
McCaffrey though is a big
deal.
I'm
saying it all. I think it all balances out.
Yeah, I guess
7 games of Ayuk, you got 11 games of Pearsall. Debo played 15 games, but only had 81 targets, and McCaffrey only played 4. So I think McCaffrey likely takes the 81 targets that Debo had. Ayuk probably plays about as much as he did last year. Like I think it's just a similar situation to what it was last year. And he got 94 targets, and George Kittle, when he's got 94 targets, is definitely good enough to be the top 3 tight end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then but you do have Jennings and Pierce also. Right. I just wanted to, when everyone was healthy in 2022 and 2023, we were looking at a target problem for George Kittle. And I went into last year going, this guy's declined in points per game 3 straight years. And I was a little nervous about him because he's getting up there in age, still a great tight end. I didn't think he was going to get a lot of targets. By the way, 2 years ago, they were last in the NFL in pass attempts when they had a healthy McCaffrey. So I think there are red flags for Kittle, but I still draft him all the time in round 4 because he's George Kittle and he does not need a lot of targets. However, in terms of tiers, in full PPR, McBride and Bowers, what are your projections, Heath? They should have a significant edge in catches over Kittle, I would think.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not really projecting a decrease, and you should do your Chip Kelly research after I say this, but because it's extensive. It's wonderful. I have Kittle at 97 targets, so 3 more than he had last year, but it's not, it's projecting a full season, so it's a little lower. And I've got Bowers and McBride still at 150.
Okay. So Chip Kelly has a great track record, I think. 2013 through 2016, he was a head coach. He took over an Eagles team that was 25th in points per game in 2012. They had pretty similar personnel, and they went up to 2nd in points per game. They were very run heavy the first year. Michael Vick and Nick Foles were their quarterbacks. Vick played 7 games. 2014, the Eagles were 6th in points per game, with Mark Sanchez playing 9 games and Nick Foles in 8 games. And it was a 16-game season. There's some overlap there. 2015, they were 18th in points per game, with mostly Sam Bradford. Their best receivers were Jordan Matthews and Zach Ertz. DeMarco Murray was their running back. He got hurt. Ryan Matthews played too. They had bad players. They were 18th in points per game. They were 6th in pass attempts per game. 2016, he takes over the 49ers. They were dead last in scoring the year before. They increased to 23rd in points per game. Their leading receiver was Jeremy Curley. Their quarterbacks were Colin Kaepernick for 12 games and Blaine Gabbert for 6 games. So he does have a little bit of run heaviness. His 4 teams were 27th in pass attempts per game, then 5th, then 6th, then 29th. And he never had a good quarterback, never had a good passer, really. Maybe Vic was good for those 7 games. I don't know that year. But I think that's an exceptional track record. Big improvement in Philadelphia, big improvement in San Francisco in terms of points per game. And you could argue Geno Smith is the best passer that he's had in the NFL. So there's that. Let me just say why I swapped to Bowers from McBride. And I think this is important when we talk about tiers. You're looking at 150 targets for Heath for these guys. Jamie thinks the targets are going down for Bowers. What do you think? Give me targets for Bowers and McBride, Jamie. What do you think?
What was McBride's targets last year?
It was like 147 was his pace or something.
I was going to say like 145 to 135.
Okay, so in the 145-ish range, maybe for these. You think?
I think both were over 150 in terms of pace. McBride had 147 in 16 games.
He was 153, and okay, so Heath's in the 150 range. Jamie's in the 140 to 145 range. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say 145 for McBride, like 130 for Bowers.
130 for Bowers. Okay, that's big. That's significant. They so far have not been anything like Kelsey and Kittle. in terms of efficiency, yards per target, yards per catch, yards per route run. And that's, I think, what you were referring to is something I said in a previous show. I think that's what I was saying. If people are drafting McBride and Bowers based on what they did last year and they're drafting them in the second round, I do think they need to do better than they did last year. And it could be just as simple as touchdowns. But I don't think 15.5 PPR fantasy points per game, in my opinion, is worth a second round pick. Certainly not ahead of a guy like A.J. Brown or Derrick Henry or something like that. Maybe you could say ahead of Ladd McConkey or Chase Brown or something like that. But I think they need to be better. I am more hopeful that Bowers can increase his efficiency because he did that as a rookie. Whereas McBride, he's been in the league 3 years. He's been a starting tight end for a year and a half. I think he might be what he is. I think Bowers is a better athlete and could average more yards per catch, more yards per target, more yards per route run. And that's why I think I'm team Bowers now over McBride. Heath, what do you think about that logic?
Yeah, I am more optimistic that Bowers can produce elite efficiency at some point in his career. And I think that there's more. I think the Chip Kelly, Geno Smith thing makes it more likely that his efficiency increases this year. The other thing we haven't talked about yet, and we probably all have different opinions on Marvin Harrison.
Yeah.
But I think there's a bigger risk that Marvin Harrison cuts into Trey McBride's target share this year than any of the additions in Las Vegas.
I would agree with that. But I also would say that the run game is going to be significantly better for the Raiders, and that's not changing for the Cardinals.
Yeah, that was another reason why I couldn't sleep, because I said, if Marvin Harrison has a really good year, does that mean that Trey McBride gets worse? Or does that mean that Kyler Murray is the most underrated quarterback in fantasy right now? Right? You know, the thing you say about Jared Goff, we like all his players, but we are drafting Goff as QB 18. Well, we're drafting Kyler as like QB 12-ish. He rushes for 500 yards every year, says he wants to run more. He's got a history of being like on pace for 4,500 passing yards. He might be a steal. I know it's not part of the tight end tiers, but do you think Marvin Harrison can have a big year, finish as a top 12 tight end, and Trey McBride can warrant a pick at the 2-3 turn, let's say?
Yes.
Not if Kyler Murray runs more.
Okay.
It's going to be, if Kyler is going to take that leap, it's going to be because of the touchdowns. Because if Harrison's getting from, let's say, 8 to 10, and McBride's going, let's say, from 2 to 6, like that's where he benefits.
Okay. All right. So that's tiers 1 and 2, unless there's anything you guys want to say about Kittle that we haven't covered. Okay. So that's tiers 1 and tiers 2 and tier 2. Sorry, that's tiers 1 and 2. Let's move on to tiers 3 and 4. And tier 3 has Sam Laporta, David Njoku, Travis Kelce, and TJ Hawkinson. Tier 4 has Evan Ingram and Mark Andrews. Those guys could not be more different. Polar opposites as players, as fantasy options, Ingram and Andrews. But tier 3 is Laporta, Njoku, Kelce, and Hawkinson. Tier 4 is Ingram and Andrews. Jamie, what's the difference between Laporta, Njoku, Kelce, Hawkinson, and Ingram and Andrews?
Well, there are more questions with Ingram and Andrews, obviously. You know, with Ingram, it's the change of teams and how will he perform in Sean Payton's offense, which could be great. Could be absolutely fantastic for him. And Bo Nix could make him, you know, easily second on the team in targets. And the Joker role that we keep hearing about could be for Ingram. And again, he's had, you know, the opportunities to, you know, show himself and has proven to be successful at times throughout his career, you know, early with the Giants, first year with Jacksonville. I think he'll be a very solid fantasy tight end, but I don't think he has the same upside as the guys in tier 3. And the thing about tier 3 is this is the group of tight ends I think that typically sways how this position goes, right? These are the group of guys, the mid-round tight ends that we always say, oh, they could be awesome, and then they let us down more times than not. I feel more comfortable about this group maybe so than any other tight ends in this range that we've talked about before. You know, Kelce was so bad last year and still was 12.2 PPR points per game. Njoku, when he's had, you know, a capable quarterback, and that's saying something because we're talking about Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston, he's been potentially a superstar. Hawkinson pre-ACL was fantastic. Can he get back to that level? And obviously Laporta, you know, depending on how you feel about the Detroit offense, is going to probably sway how you feel about him in terms of where he goes in this tier. But I'd be shocked if he's not the 4th tight end off the board. And I think he's going to pick up where he ended last year as opposed to where he started, where he was much more of a factor in the red zone. So for me, those guys are all capable top 5 caliber tight ends. The guys in tier 3.
I have found the point where Jamie and I have the most disagreement. It's the tight end position after the first 3 tiers. I agree completely. I'm lower on Laporta, but he's definitely still in that same tier. I think everything he said about those guys is right. What I would say is if I don't get a tier 3 guy, I'm definitely not taking a tight end before round 10.
Tier 3 for Jamie is Laporta, Njoku, Kelsey, and Hawkinson.
And I agree with that.
Oh, that's your tier 3 too? That's your tier 3 also?
What I'm saying is after that, and mostly it's just, I've probably talked enough about how much I don't like Evan Ingram.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay. He's like one of the least efficient plays in football has been targeting Evan Ingram. He was absolutely awful last year. And the year before, he was very good because of a high target volume, but we talked about that all last off season, how that wasn't going to happen again because it was only because the wide receivers got hurt. And it was Doug Peterson's offense, which he's not in anymore. One of the things I've talked about is how rare it is to have a team that throws to their running backs a lot and their tight ends a lot. And for Sean Payton's either going to have to change a lot and not target to the running backs as much for Evan Ingram to be good, because he's not the type of guy that is going to do what George Kittle does or even close.
Is he calling
Like
right now?
he needs 8 targets per game to be a low-end tight end 1.
Mm-hmm. Okay. He and Njoku actually had very similar seasons. They were both awful. Njoku needs to bet. I mean, can we talk about how bad Njoku's numbers were last year? Holy cow. Let me get his 17 game pace. 150 targets, 780 yards. So these 2 guys, Ingram and Njoku, were 2 of the worst in football. And so were Kelsey and Ferguson. Those are 4 guys who just had horrible stats. For Njoku and Ingram, it was a very low yak. And that's a stat that tends to bounce back unless the ADOT changes. Go ahead.
The difference is that has not been the case for David Njoku's almost entire career.
Yeah.
And that has been the case for Ingram's, and Ingram's 2 years older, and Ingram's going to a new team where the target share is not as likely to continue as it does for Njoku.
So when you look at tier 3, Jamie, Laporta, Njoku, Kelsey, and Hawkinson, would you say you're excited to draft this tier? Because let me tell you something. Last year, I think maybe tier 3 may have been something like, I'm looking at Fantasy Pros ADP, Kincaid, Kittle, Pitts, Ingram.
That's what I'm saying. It's always this group.
Right. Well, we've got 3 horrible busts in there and George Kittle. But I think you said you're more excited or you feel better about this group than you have in years past. So Laporta, Njoku, Kelsey, Hawkinson, you feel good about this group?
This has typically been the range where we start to prop up guys like Kincaid and Pitts and OJ Howard and, the guys that we're coming off of either strong finishes or decent seasons the year before. And we're hoping that they're going to take that next step, but they're not as good as the guys that are typically going ahead of them, which has always been Kelsey or Andrews or Jimmy Graham or those type of guys, so it's usually been an unproven group. These guys really are proven, and even Laporta going into year 3, like, what you're getting at this point, at least I hope, touchdown dependent guy in a very prolific offense. So I think the 2 that scare me the most would be Njoku and Hawkinson. And Njoku is mostly because of the quarterback situation. Because again, if you say that they're going away from Flacco or he doesn't start the season as the starter, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned. Now, it may work out fine because of Stefanski's offense and Sanders may lean on him or Gabriel may lean on him, wherever the quarterback is, Kenny Pickett. But similar to Jerry Jeudy, like, I'm very much more inclined to be excited about David Njoku if it's Joe Flacco. And Hawkinson, we just don't know where he's at from his recovery, because he had some good moments when he came back last year. It just wasn't great. And now you have a quarterback change. He could benefit if there's a suspension for Jordan Addison. He could really struggle if Addison's there and Jefferson's doing what he does. So those 2 guys make me the most concerned of that group, but not to the fact that I'm going to draft Ingram or Andrews ahead of them. I just think like those are the 2 situations that make me the most worried.
And I'll do some more research on this maybe later in the offseason, but I think Njoku's been better with basically every quarterback he's played with besides Deshaun Watson. Like even the first year that Watson was there, any other backup was better. And to the Flacco point, it's just worth remembering. I don't know how many games we'll get of Joe Flacco. I hope it's a lot. But in 5 games with him 2 years ago, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game.
Insane. Yeah, that's the plus, clearly.
And he's going on Football Guys. David Njoku's going 92nd. In Fantasy Pros, he's not even a top 100 pick. So we're not talking about him as a 6th round pick, 7th round pick or anything, David Njoku here. So that's terrific value. Whereas Travis Kelce is 69th on Football Guys, and he is 78th on Fantasy Pros. So this is the point of tiers, right? You if these 4 guys are in the same tier and one of them's going 100th and Sam Laporta is going in the 60s, 53rd on Football Guys, 63rd or 65th on Fantasy Pros, makes David Njoku look a pretty damn good value. And then
he might be the best value of any position. Yep. You know, if again he gets Flacco for 10 plus games, 13 plus games, like there's huge upside. He just gave you the numbers. Like we're talking about Kelce like numbers in his prime.
Yeah, but however, if he gets Pickett or a rookie.
But again, to Heath's point though, it may not be a disaster. Like it may not be Flacco's heights or ceiling, but it still could be 13, 14 points per game. And that's much better the value where you're getting. I mean, we're talking about Kittle leading the position last year at just under 16 points per game. And you tell me I'm getting David Njoku 12 to 14 points per game, somewhere in there without Joe Flacco. Again, it's a big ask, but still, Stefanski's offense. The other concern I have a little bit small with Njoku is, does Harold Fannin take a little bit of work away, a little bit of production away? Because look, the receiving core, we've talked about this enough. Like Judy's performance to end last season was fantastic. Can he do it again? We'll find out. Cedric Tillman, 3 games of just amazing production, but that's the best he's ever done in his career. Like we could see a lot of 12 personnel and both tight ends getting the target share, but the touchdowns going to Fannin or key plays going to Fannin that we see maybe a little bit of a problem for Njoku just based on what he's had to deal with in the past.
Boy, do I see arrowhead red colored flags for Travis Kelce. I mean, 36 in October, was tight end 7 per game in full PPR last year, tight end 12 per game in non-PPR. His yak has tanked. He was one of 4 tight ends that had just awful metrics. Njoku, Kelce, Ingram, and Jake Ferguson. They each ranked 27th or lower among 31 tight ends with 50 or more targets in both yards per target and yards per catch. I mean, it just seems so obvious what's happening here. And in 3 games with Rashee Rice, he had 12 targets. Rashee Rice, I think, had 29 or something like that. Xavier Worthy, those were the first 3 games of his career. Marquise Brown didn't even play in those 3 games. I don't know how you couldn't be worried about Travis Kelce. I think you could be optimistic about him too, because last year when Patrick Mahomes was good, in 9 regular season games in which he threw for 250 more yards, Travis Kelce averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game in PPR, which would have made him tight end 1. In 7 games in which Mahomes threw for fewer than 250 yards, he was awful in those games. Kelce averaged 7 PPR fantasy points per game. Mahomes averaged 190 yards per game in those. So I get the optimism, but my God, I don't know that there's a player who has more downside than Travis Kelce, in my opinion, because last year was very concerning when Rice was on the field.
He has the most downside in tier 3, but he's recommitted to his body, right, Jamie? He's
lost 185 pounds.
150 pounds, yeah.
I think the things that I look at with Kelce, it's 4 numbers. He was 3rd in receptions and receiving yards at the position last year. Or no, 3rd in targets and receptions last year, 5th in receiving yards, and scored 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
So where did the receptions and targets go? Where did the receiving yards go, north or south? And, you mentioned Adam, there's maybe as much competition for targets than he's ever had to deal with before, especially as he's getting older. I do think we're going to see a better offense, and that could lead to him getting back to that 8+ touchdown range. And if that happens, and let's say he's now 5th in targets and 5th in receptions and 8th in receiving yards, it sort of balances itself out a little bit. And so clearly 36 is not the age you want to see. After what we've seen from him, how he's been moving the last couple of years, it's not good. But now he may get open a little bit more. Defenses can't focus on him as much because of all these guys. And so it's going to be a little fascinating. I think when you're drafting Kelsey, I took him in our pick by pick series, not to keep referencing this because it's just us drafting. So it's hard to say, but like round 8, I'll do that all day long. If Travis Kelsey is still staying there, round 7 is like where I'm buying in. I think round 6 is a good range to start to consider him.
But just for this tiers discussion, right? Does it make more sense to take Travis Kelsey in round 7 or round 8, or David Njoku, or even Evan Ingram in round 9 or 10, or Mark Andrews?
Well, I mean, I would obviously take Njoku because I have him ranked higher. So yes, if I can guarantee myself that I'm waiting out Njoku in the draft that I talked about, I think it was Heath took Njoku before Kelsey was off the board. So that's his rankings as well, I believe. So you're taking, again, knowing your league, that's the biggest thing. So I didn't think I was going to get Njoku instead of Kelsey, but the longer he sits on the board, yes, there's more downside than upside, but like, was that the worst season we've seen from Kelsey and still 12 plus PPR points per game? Like, that's hard to find.
I know, but Rice only played 3 games. I
get everything. I don't disagree at all, but
yeah,
if we were expecting typical Kelsey, he's not waiting that long. He's not in this tier.
All right, I got to wrap it up with this. Mark Andrews is in tier 4 for Jamie. 69 targets in 17 games last year. Caught 90% of his end zone targets, which is absurd. By comparison, Trey McBride has caught, I think, 20% of his end zone targets in his career. 4 out of 16, or 3 out of 15. Yeah. So Andrews is just an interesting player. He is elite efficient. Let me take a break, Heath. We'll come back and finish up with Mark Andrews. One of the most efficient tight ends in football, needs more targets. We'll be right back on FFT.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Heath, what do you think about Mark Andrews? He's in tier 4 for Jamie.
I think it's all in how you want to frame it, because I think it's very, very similar to Travis Kelsey in a complete opposite way. Kelsey had all of the targets last year and still had the catches, and we know he has elite upside, didn't score any touchdowns. The efficiency was awful. Andrews scored all the touchdowns and had great efficiency, but the target share, kind of like with Laporta too, is terrifying. If Mark Andrews just has a good touchdown rate next year of like 6%, which is still very good, he's going to be dropped.
Yeah.
If the targets stay the same.
Right.
And it's hard for me to envision a situation unless Derrick Henry gets hurt or the Ravens defense just has one of those years where like the Lions in the middle of the year last year.
Yeah.
I don't see the pass volume ballooning for Baltimore. And so you just have to count on not just great efficiency, which Andrews has almost always given us, but insanely good efficiency that we never expect anyone to repeat.
All right, let's go to tiers 5 and 6 in Jamie's tight end tiers. As we are moving into the double-digit rounds now in average draft position, tight end 5 is tier 5 is the 2 rookies, Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. And then tier 6 are fallback options, and not bad ones. Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert, Jake Ferguson, and Zach Ertz. We'll talk about tier 6 in a moment here, but let's take a look at tier 5, Loveland and Warren. Thoughts, Jamie?
Huge upside and a lot of questions. So, Loveland, number 10 overall pick in the NFL draft, obviously going to a team and a coach that is going to, I think, rely on him quite a bit. But it's the same conversation we have about all the Bears pass catchers. Like, who is going to be the primary options in this offense? And the fact that Loveland, I know he says he's fine, but dealing with a shoulder injury this offseason for a guy that, dealt through the whole draft process, so I'm not mistaken, a little bit banged up as well. So will he come in and command targets right away? I hope so. And there's a lot to love about what Ben Johnson did with Sam Laporta as a rookie in somewhat of a crowded receiving core, made him a red zone threat. But now you're asking him to do that, Caleb Williams to be, much better, and still DJ Moore, Romo Dunze, Luther Burden all get opportunities. So there's the, sort of things that's weighing him down. Tyler Warren, clearly another guy, number 14 overall pick, going to a team that I think will lean on him quite a bit. But you have quarterback concerns, and there's still Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, or Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, however you want to, look at those two guys on a very, very run-heavy offense. So I think anybody expecting Brock Bowers production from those two guys is probably asking way, way too much and very unrealistic. But can they be productive in their rookie campaigns? I think you want to draft 2 tight ends if you're taking these guys. And so tier 5 and tier 6, you can take 2 guys from this group, and I think you'll get by. Start the guy in tier 6 earlier, and then if the rookie starts to produce, you have a trade chip or 2 very good players on your team. But I think looking at Loveland and Warren as immediate starting caliber fantasy options, you got to be a little bit patient.
Yeah, what's interesting about tight end is that this is a position where we often have players. This is why we say great or late. We often have players come from the double-digit rounds or sometimes undrafted and finishing in the top 5, having really good years. So Loveland and Warren, Jamie said don't expect Brock Bowers, but they're obviously very talented players. It could be one of them. But Heath, when you look at tier 6, Kraft, Kincaid, Goddard, Ferguson, Ertz, do you see that kind of potential for any of these guys? Kraft, Kincaid, Goddard, Ferguson, Ertz.
I'm going to agree with Michael in the chat with a little less enthusiasm. Not sure I'd put the exclamation point in, but he thinks Kraft should be in tier 4 with Andrews and Ingram. I think he should be in tier 4 with Andrews. But other than that, I pretty much agree with everything Jamie said. I think there's a chance that Jake Ferguson's target share ends up being a little bit high, not impacted by George Pickens, and he's maybe a little bit too low, but this is where I have him. If Zach Ertz just does what he did last year for some reason again, then he's probably a little too low, but this is where I have him. I think probably I feel more confident in the floor for all of tier 6 than I do tier 5, but tier 5 is much more likely to have a breakout season that you get excited about. And I think Kraft is as well. And just to keep the theme going, I would take all of these guys before Evan Ingram.
I think the one thing about Kraft is, again, the pass volume. How much is it going to increase for a team that just brought in 2 rookie wide receivers? One, depending on how you feel about Savion Williams, but Matthew Golden being a first-round rookie. And so, yes, they have Christian Watson for however long he's going to be out, maybe the entire season. Seems a little bit more optimistic on his recovery, but still. So Kraft is George Kittle light, right? I mean, just as efficient as them, and a guy that his coach has, from the minute the season ended, has been talking him up as getting more opportunities and being more of a playmaker. And so, I think I'm the lowest of the 3 of us between you and Dave on where he's ranked. Still a top 12 tight end for me, but you tell me right now that they're going to throw the ball more, then I have him ranked too low. And really, when you look at the guys in tier 6, the one that stands out the most clearly is Kincaid. And I sort of view him similar to the rookies based on how I think he will hopefully perform. And again, keep using that word hope is tough to do, but he played through 2 significant knee injuries last year.
Yeah.
And if he's healthy, you look at this receiving court, there's just such a big opportunity for him if he can get those targets. And we haven't seen anything that suggests that he's going to get those targets. But again, more of a betting on talent here as opposed to necessarily situation.
Man, I really like these 2 tiers. Tier 5, Loveland and Warren. Tier 6, Kraft, Kincaid, Goddard. I think I'd probably draw the line with Ferguson and Ertz. I don't know. Ferguson being 3rd on the team in targets, probably. And maybe he could be out target Pickens. Ertz just caught
best tight end values, somebody said.
Yeah, who said that? What was that? That was yesterday?
Dan. That was Dan.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it with Ferguson, but Goddard is a lot like Kraft. I mean, he's going to be 3rd on the team in targets, but in just the 7 games that Dallas Goedert played with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith last year, he averaged 10.5 PPR fantasy points per game. That's good enough to be tight end 10. The year before, he was tight end 12 per game. And by the way, in those 7 games I mentioned, Jalen Hurts was throwing 25 passes per game, on pace for fewer than 3,500 yards. So it's the same thing. How much passing increases are going to be in the Eagles offenses? They have talked about that they're going to change things up a bit. Goddard's not going to win you your league if Brown and Smith get hurt, but he's probably going to finish around 12th per game, right? I mean, he's going to be usable. It's going to be frustrating.
Right. I've got him 12th.
Yeah, he's going to be frustrating because he's going to have some duds. I think that's the case with any tight end on a team that sometimes could throw like 18 passes in a week where they're blowing out their opponent and they're run heavy to begin with.
Man, how insane is it that we've gone through tier 6 and we're at what, tight end 16, and we've not even like thought about Kyle Pitts.
All right, let's go to tier 7.
Well, I was gonna say, like, the tier 6 guys for me are like 10 PPR points per game. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Kincaid, I think Kincaid was second in target per route run rate last year. He just didn't run that many routes. And when he came back from his injury late in the season, I think maybe 3 or 4 regular season games in the playoffs, he's playing about 40% of the snaps, Kincaid. He just wasn't healthy at all, but especially after that second injury.
Or is it that they have gone to a more run-heavy system and Dawson Knox is better in the running game?
No, because the snaps went down a lot after that injury. He wasn't exactly a high snap guy to begin with, so in that case, you're right. But it was exaggerated after he missed however many games it was, week 10-ish, something like that. I don't remember right off the top of my head. All right, so let's go to tier 7 now, because in tier 6, you could still end up with one of those guys as your starting tight end. Punt on tight end, end up with Tucker Kraft or Dalton Kincaid or Dallas Goedert, or if you like Ferguson or Ertz, sure, and you could feel okay about it. You might want to get someone else too, someone before that. They may be, or maybe it's one of the rookies, like Jamie said. Maybe you combine tiers 5 and 6. Tier 7, Jamie, is it safe to say you probably don't want this tier to be your starting tight end? Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, Isaiah Likely, Brenton Strange, Hunter Henry. That's tier 7. Jonnu, Pitts, Waller, Likely, Strange, Henry.
No, but these are all guys, and if you and we see some maybe competent quarterback play, throw Juwan Johnson in this tier as well, that they're going to be waiver wire guys at some point during the season. Pitts will have one of those games. I mean, he scored a touchdown, I believe, in week 1 last year. He gets off to a good start and he's not drafted. He'll get easily picked up off the waiver wire. Jonnu Smith gets off to a good start with Aaron Rodgers, same thing. I mean, look, Isaiah Likely broke a lot of people's fab last year because of the 2 touchdown game he had in week 1. And Strange could easily be one of those guys for the Jaguars. And then Hunter Henry was, very productive. And again, if you don't buy into the new additions in New England, like, he's going to still be a significant factor for Drake May. So I don't mind looking at these guys and saying, okay, plug and play, maybe get me through a few weeks, but do I want to draft them as starters? No.
And I think there's another guy that I don't really have ranked like it's possible, but Mike Gesicki, that somebody in the chat said you just need to draft him and bank on T. Higgins getting hurt, which there is contingent upside if one of those wide receivers gets hurt for sure.
Yeah.
But also going down the stretch, their last 6 games when he was playing with Higgins, he was getting 6 targets a game. He scored 0 touchdowns, so nobody cared. But I think there may be a little bit of hope that Gesicki's more involved.
So 5 games that Higgins missed last year, Gesicki was averaging 12.3 PPR points per game.
Yep.
I'm sorry, 13.4, at least 12.3 3 times.
There's another tight end who was averaging close to 6 targets per game. Yeah, another tight end who averaged 6 targets per game in his last 4 games. He has not shown up in the first 8 tiers. And he is Giants' second-year tight end, Theo Johnson. He scored 14.1, 7.7, 6.9, and 10.4 PPR fantasy points in his last 4 games.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about Theo Johnson coming into the NFL, and I still have some hope. It feels like Russell Wilson's not a very good fit for him. Like, Russell Wilson wants to throw 40-yard bombs or dump it off to the running back.
I appreciate Thomas throwing up tiers 9 and 10 here. Is a lot of names. Let me just go back to tiers 7 and 8 real quick and just wrap it up, because for the audio audience here. So we have Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller. I've already made the case that Waller, James, he could be streamer. I feel like he could do what Jonnu Smith did last year, which was run the shortest routes in the world and catch a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage.
But what can he do what Jonnu Smith did after the catch last year?
I don't know. I don't know.
He's not as explosive as Jonnu Smith. He may have been once upon a time,
We don't
but I
know.
mean,
He's
32
refreshed.
years. Huh?
He's refreshed.
He's also 32 years old. Last time we saw him, he was, battling a hamstring injury. So
Yeah. Good.
Like Jonnu's averaged 2 more yak per reception for his career than Waller.
I bet
So
you even got slower though.
What?
What about yards per catch?
Oh, that's probably lower. 11.8 for Waller, 10.8 for Jonnu. So
Right.
it was more, but it was more down the field stuff for Waller.
Yeah. Likely Brenton Strange, Hunter Henry, that rounds out tier 7. Juwan Johnson, Chigo Okonkwo, Mason Taylor, and Mike Gesicki in tier 8. And I'll ask you this because you have Mason Taylor in tier 8. So let's go now. We can go to tiers 9 and 10.
Well, we get a lot of questions about Juwan Johnson, or at least maybe one commenter. The quarterback situation just scares me. I mean, look, there's great target opportunity here and no Taysom Hill for who knows how long. He was great to close the season last year. It seems like he's great every year at the end of the season when everybody's sort of forgotten about him. And we could see a situation where the inexperienced quarterback leans on him. I don't know exactly what his numbers were with Spencer Rattler last year. I'm probably going to guess not very good, but there's a chance here for him just based on his opportunity. And they did give him a contract extension this offseason, so that's a positive.
Okay, so you have Mason Taylor in tier 8. Let's take a look at tiers 9 and 10. It's basically every other tight end that's ever played football. Dalton Schultz, Jatavion Sanders, Elijah Arroyo, Tyler Conklin, Pat Freiermuth, Cade Otton. I guess we could say this group needs an injury before we start thinking about them. Needs an injury to a teammate.
Potentially. I mean, Schultz was good the last time CJ Stroud was good for a full season. So something to keep an eye on there with just a lot of moving parts with the receiving core. I don't have much hope, but if you're looking at it that way, I do think that in the case of some of the replacement tight ends that, Cole Kmet will still have somewhat of a factor that will impact Colston Loveland, similar to like a Dawson Knox with how Dalton Kincaid sort of struggled a little bit because the veteran was there. I'm very curious to see the Rams tight end situation. So Ferguson, I think just in the last couple of days got some hype. Higbee, when he came back from the ACL tear, was actually very good. And, we'll see how that sort of plays out with Adams now there and the other guys, Tutu Atwell, whatever, joining Puka Nacua. But Ferguson could clearly be a big problem for Tyler Higbee. In the case of the Seattle guys, I'm hoping Arroyo is the guy there. And then the Chargers one is another one to keep an eye on because Gadsden, I'm fond of him long term, but Tyler Conklin just seems like one of these guys, similar to like how we talk about Najee Harris with the Chargers. Like he's going to be, I think, a good role player for that team. And he closed the season playing very well with Aaron Rodgers last year for the Jets. So nobody's drafting these guys, but these are just, like you said, maybe an injury, but could get off to decent starts and could be waiver wire consideration.
I know it's just splitting hairs at this point, but just curious why you had Mason Taylor in tier 8, Elijah Arroyo in tier 9, Terrence Ferguson and Harold Fannin Jr. in tier 10.
Open up your notes for today.
Okay. What
You mentioned something about the Jets receiving core?
Okay. Yeah. Josh Reynolds.
Well, and not just that, but Mason Taylor is trying to overcome Stone Smart, whereas Arroyo still has Noah Fant and Ferguson still has Tyler Higbee.
It's just there's such an easy path to targets for Mason Taylor. Such an easy path.
Yep. By the way, I wasn't disagreeing with it. I was just trying to get that explanation. Mile High Luke says Taylor has a real opportunity to be second on his team in targets. And this will be the moment where I remind you that in the last 9 seasons, there have only been 3 tight ends who have finished top 5 in PPR without being first or second on their team in targets. So that is 45 tight ends who have finished top 5 over the last 9 seasons, and only 3 of them were not first or second on their team in targets. It's a pretty big deal at this position. Targets are key. Goodbye, everyone. That was a fun show. Thank you very much. Jamie's tight end tiers and all of his tiers are available on the website on cbsports.com/fantasy. Heath, do you have your tiers published?
No.
Are you going to? What do you have coming out?
I've got the a little bit of pick by pick, and then there'll be an opportunity index coming out early next week, kind of looking at where teams threw the ball, what situations changed, which could lead to changes in terms of projections this year, and teams that added players but don't necessarily have room for them, or teams that have vacated targets but don't seem to have filled those.
I really hate it when Jamie or Dan makes me write an article. I have to write 2 articles this week.
Oh, there's a lot more coming.
No, for what? What do I have to do?
We're gonna do a lot more pick by pick. Everybody loves it.
Pick by pick is very cool. Do you think I can start my pick by pick recap of Team 8, I believe, with quote, "If only I had drafted Isaac Garendo," end quote, and be like, not usually. Usually I don't feel that way about it.
The last stories that I've edited for you, when our magazine used to be prominent and the best in the business,
We're great.
Changed a lot. Had to change a lot. I don't have to edit your stories anymore, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow with a mailbag. Remember, tinyurl.com/2025FFT. Go get, there's 4 mailbag spots available, $50 each. It all goes to St. Jude. Be part of it. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.